Great, thank you very much. I'm pleased today to introduce our speaker, who is Wayne Jensen of Jensen, Yorba, Lott. Now, I know most, if not everybody in this room, knows Wayne and probably knows Wayne very well, and knows of Wayne's long commitment to Alaska, to Southeast, and to Juneau. Wayne and his lovely wife Rita are celebrating their 40th year in Juneau this year. And Wayne, of course, is principal of Jensen, Yorba, Lott. It's that hat he's wearing today that brings him to do his speech today about Capitol building renovations and our role as the capital city. Wayne, of course, has served on many boards and commissions and helped with various groups and efforts in Juneau over the years. He's also the chair of the Alaska Committee, which is integral to helping us be successful as a capital city. And if you're on the Alaska Committee, as I am and others are in this room, it takes time. It's nothing compared to being chair of the Alaska Committee, as Wayne could readily attest to as its previous long-term chair. So anyway, if you please join me in welcoming Wayne Jensen. Thanks.
Thanks, Max. It's always a risk having Max introduce you, but I think you did a good job this time, so thanks, Max.
I'm glad
you cleaned it up quite a bit from previous ones, so appreciate that. I know what you mean when you say Kathy asked you to do something. It's more of a command, and she asked me to do two things today. One is to talk a little bit about the update of the Alaska Committee, and then to talk about the current plans to renovate the Capitol. So I'll try to do both of those. Right now, on the screen is my Alaska Committee uniform. This was taken a couple of years ago at the Tanana Valley Fair. One of the events that the Alaska Committee does, along with JCVB, is staff a Juneau booth at both the Palmer and the Tanana Valley Fairs, and this was one of those opportunities to represent our capital city at Fairbanks. So I'll see if I can get this thing to go. There we go. Whoops, that's not right. Dan, I may need some help. I brought my tech savvy with me, too. I also brought my security detail. You notice a lot of people from Jensen, Yorba, Lott with me, so I've got a little bit of help here if you guys get too crazy. And a lot of friends from the Alaska Committee, so I think I'm probably pretty well protected. A little bit on the Alaska Committee, just to update. It was formed in 1995 as a more proactive group to help improve Juneau's capital as Alaska's capital. So its purpose is to make state government work better for all Alaskans by enhancing Juneau as Alaska's capital city. And some of the activities that we've taken and some of the achievements we've helped with over the years are the Gavel to Gavel. We partnered with KTOO years ago to get that going, and it continues to improve. It's an integral part of keeping people across the state connected to the goings-on of the Capitol. It's been very helpful and will continue to improve. Also, we partnered with Alaska Airlines years ago to get the constituent fare, which is a discounted fare for people traveling to the capital city during the legislative session. That also has been a very successful program and continues. And we do things like outreach, like sponsor the community reception for the legislature at the beginning of every session when everybody's still friendly and it's a very social event. It's a good time. And we've heard from other legislators, from many legislators, that it's one of the highlights of the session getting started. So right now we're working on helping the legislature, assisting the legislature, celebrating. And I don't want to use that term celebrating. We want to mark the 100th year of the Alaska legislature. In 1913, the first legislature was formed, and this marks 100 years of the legislature representing the territory and the state. And on March 4th, I believe it is Sunday, marks the actual date, and there's going to be some events planned. Many of which will be in the Elks Hall, which was the location for the first session, and we're working with the owners of the Elks Hall and the legislature, and particularly Senator Stevens' office, who's the chair of the committee in the legislature, to put that on. So look forward to that. That's a good event. It's going to be a lot of fun. recreate some history in the state, particularly relative to the legislature. So, and then we worked on some improvement projects. Some of the things that we were involved in or supported were the renovation, the purchase and the renovation of the Terry Miller Building, which used to be the Capitol School. The same thing with the Masonic Hall, converting that into the Thomas Stewart Legislative Office Building. Some of the Main Street improvements, we found through some of our polling that parking was a really big issue with the legislator and their staff, and lent our support to the construction of the parking garage at the bottom of Main Street, which I understand it has been a very big success for people visiting the Capitol as well as legislators. And the improvements to the Juneau Airport. Those have recently been completed. There's still some things ongoing, but the main part of the airport that attracts visitors traveling on Alaska Airlines has been improved, and that is a better gateway to Alaska's capital city. So, and then capital improvements. We've always supported making improvements to the Capitol and the Capitol campus. And that's where I'm going to transition into the next portion of the deal once I take off my uniform for the Alaska Committee. But I wanted to go over a little bit. The Alaska Committee, just for your own information, is run by a board of directors. It has 5 designated positions, which are the mayor, Kathy Romick from Juneau Convention Visitors Bureau, Brian with JEDC, and also Shelley Wright with Southeast Conference, and Nancy Woe, and I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name, but who is the newly appointed director of JCVB. So those 5 positions are designated. The other 17 members of the committee are elected at the annual meetings, and they serve for 3-year terms staggered over a period of time. And I won't read them all, but several people are here in the room that are now being on the Alaska Committee, and there are several others in the community that have served over the years. It's a good group. We meet once a month. If you're looking for something to do on the second Wednesday of the month at 7 a.m., please join us. The meetings are always open to the public. So, and then one last comment. This is a future voter from Fairbanks. You can see we're giving him some gold from Juneau. He was pretty happy camper, and the outreach that we do through those fairs, I think, is very valuable, reaching people across the state, and particularly our future voters. So now I'd like to kind of transition into another hat, which is my architect's hat, and talk about the Capitol. First, I want to go into a little bit of history, and then we'll go into the condition of the building, and then some of the renovation that's planned. This is a sign that was at the corner of 4th and Main Streets. You can see, this is 4th Street and Main Street. You can note that Main Street, I don't know if you can see in the photograph, is a wood boardwalk street at that point in time. I think this photo was taken about 1920. And this is you see the site. This is the site of the current building. And when I first saw this sign, I thought, well, this is a great sign. This is, it's a positive thing. This is announcing a brand new building that's going to be in Juneau. And, like you see on construction sites, future building to be built here. You can't read it, and I'll read it to you in a minute, but it turns out it's more of a sign of frustration with the pace of government. And I'll read it to you. This is a site for Alaska's Capitol building, paid for in part by the citizens of Juneau. In 1910, Congress appropriated $200,000 for its construction, which, being at first delayed, was definitely postponed at the outbreak of the war until the return of peace. In this connection, the Secretary of the Treasurer, on January 15, 1918, made the following declaration and promise. Had the war not come to America, there would have been no necessary delay in the construction of this building. It will be progressed as rapidly as possible, remember that term, as rapidly as possible after the return of peace. The citizens of Juneau, relying upon the good faith of the government, made of a mining camp a capital city by expending hundreds of thousands of dollars in erecting businesses, houses, banks, hotels, public schools, the city hall, and many splendid residences. Good faith as well as public necessity now demand the erection of the building. So, the planning for the Capitol started in the early 1900s. You know, this was 1920 or thereabouts. Still nothing had happened. Yeah, they had one good excuse. You know, World War II broke, which put a damper on a few things. But it turned out that the $200,000 that was appropriated initially in 1910 was nowhere near close to the amount of money. So in about 1913, the city of Juneau purchased the land, and one of the things that they were supposed to do with the money was buy the land. They hadn't gotten around to buy all the land. They had bought part of the land, but they hadn't bought the rest of it. So Juneau collected $23,000, bought the land, gave it to the federal government to build the Capitol. Some of you will recall that this is a story that's been repeated a couple of times over history. But this was, you know, in 1910, that happened. 1913, we gave him the property. 1918, the Secretary of Treasury said, we're still going to do this, and we're going to do it as quickly as possible. In 1923, they finally appropriated some money to start the design. The design was completed 6 years later in 1929. We sometimes are slow, but we usually can get things done quicker than 6 years to design a building, even one this large. It started construction in 1929, was finally completed in 1931. And this is what the building looked like in 1931. It was called the Territorial and Federal Building. It stayed like this for quite some time. One of the things to note here is there's a large cornice on the top of the building, and I'll show some pictures as we go through the scenario here, but that was removed eventually, and we'll explain why. The building cost about $1 million to build, which was probably a significant amount of money, and you can see that the 4th Street and Main Street have now probably been paved or at least smoothed off, and there's sidewalks and new cars sitting in front. And also, you might note that when they talked about all the things that Juneau was doing, there's now the Terry Miller Building, which is Capitol School. It was just recently completed. And off to the side is the Scottish Rite Temple, the Masonic Hall, which was completed about 1928. So, there was a lot of work going on in the immediate neighborhood. So now we go to 1959. This is when the building transitioned from the Territorial Building to the Alaska State Capitol. And this picture was taken on July 4th, 1959, when the raising of the 49-star flag at the library. And you can see here the building served a good purpose. It was the great place to see everything going on. You see all the people looking out the windows and all the crowd that was gathered on Main Street and 4th Street for the opening ceremony, raising the flag on January or July 4th.
I wonder if anybody here was in that.
Clark, were you there? Yeah. I thought so. Probably some others as well. Bill, were you there? No? No? This next picture is mainly for dating. Do all you remember Nimbus? Nimbus was installed in 1978. After some controversy, it was removed in 1984. And the only reason I show this is a picture of Nimbus, in the courtyard of the Diamond Courthouse with the Capitol in the background. One of the things I want to point out is you see the cornice on the roof, near the roof, is gone. Sometime prior to this, the cornice was removed. We understand that it was leaking. It was perceived to be in danger of falling off or failing, and so it was removed at some point in time in the prior to 1978. We're not sure exactly when, but it was done prior to that. That, according to one of our consultants, was provided considerable amount of protection to the building walls, and once that was removed, some of the deterioration caused by water and rain essentially accelerated the project. So now I want to get into some of the current conditions. This is an excerpt from a report that was produced with our help by Paul Lukes, who's an envelope consultant. He's an architect from Washington area who specializes in, I'll call it forensic architecture, in analyzing buildings, particularly masonry buildings and particularly historic buildings, to determine potential condition of the building and potential causes and solutions. And Paul has worked on the project, worked in this building at 3 different times over the last 10 years or so, looking at it. He first looked at it as sort of a general overview of the building to get a general idea of what the condition of the building was. He looked at it specifically in 2006, just looking at the portico portion, the front of the building. And then again, he was hired by Legislative Council in 2010, and a team of other people, engineers, structural engineers, and ourselves, to document the extent of the condition of the building, extent of the problems of the building, and to produce some costs for renovation, some options for renovation and cost. And so we were hired in December of 2012 by Legislative Council to actually start designing the building, because Paul's report is just about complete. We had enough issue that we could start designing it. So this is the 4th effort in the last 10 years to actually address a problem. And this is the one where we're actually doing the restoration and doing the design work, which is supposed to start soon. This drawing is a colored illustration of the south wall of the 4th Street side of the building. And the colors, the red indicates the brick in the building. The building is composed of 3 basic materials: brick, stone, and terracotta. And the yellow is the stone on the front of the building. There's also some stone columns, the large stone marble columns, which were mined in Prince of Wales Island, are on the front of the building. And then you can see the brown. The brown area is the terracotta, and terracotta is essentially clay tile. All of these materials are porous to some degree and allow some water to get into them, and that's been one of the issues, is that the water management of the building has caused some deterioration over time. And it's an 80-years-old building, and those buildings exposed to this kind of weather just have a problem. So as we go through, I'll show a little bit of the issues that we're talking about. This slide shows 3 of those materials, or all 3 of those materials. Brick, of course, and you can kind of see from the slide that the brick surface of the brick has deteriorated over time. We understand that it was sandblasted at least once in its history, and what that does is it removes sort of the hard crust of the brick, which exposes it to more water penetration. So even though that was done to improve the appearance of the building, it probably had some detrimental effects to the system itself, and that may have caused a little more problem. The terracotta, which, as well as some of those horizontal bands that I talked about, is actually borders the windows. It's a very decorative portion of the building. Terracotta can be, if it cracks and some of the joints can allow some water into the system as well. And then the lower area, the white area, is stone, and there's stone used, not only the marble on the columns, which I talked about was from Prince of Wales Island, but there's some other stone, which is either a limestone or a sandstone, both of which look about the same and have some of the same physical characteristics. In this case, it's used for windowsills, so it's kind of a horizontal ledge. Horizontal ledges tend to collect dirt and moisture, and they can grow moss, and which tends to deteriorate materials as well. It's also a very brittle material and it can crack. It's white in this location, in this photograph, because over the years a lot of the stone has been coated with an elastomeric or a rubberized coating, and that served its purpose to protect the building a little bit more, protect those materials from water damage. But that material now has lived its life expectancy, and it's starting to degrade a little bit too. So it's time to remove that and do something else. So. And this slide is a little more close-up of the brick. You can see, the coarseness of the surface of the brick, and then, what happens when water gets into the brick. It flakes off, surface pieces of it, and this happens in several places throughout the building, and it's one of the issues with the brick. The stone. This is probably the worst case of the stone, but on the base of the building, there's stone right at the grass area. That stone has gotten water in behind it, and so when it freezes, water freezes, it expands, and it's pushed the stone out. This is not structural, it's just a facing material on the concrete foundations, but it's time to replace that. And when we replace this, we'll replace it with precast concrete, which is much denser, much more solid, and it will resist the weather a lot more than the stone did. And this is one of the some of the stone window sills. Besides being weathered, they're very brittle, and one of the things that we suspect is that over the years the building has been exposed to some earthquake loads. We haven't had anything major here, but we've had some earthquake loads. The building was not designed to resist earthquake loads the way we understand them today, and so when that happens, the building wants to try to rack a little bit, and the brittle materials will tend to crack, and you can see a lot of the corners of the windowsills have actually cracked in kind of a diagonal pattern, and that's very, very typical of damage that's caused by earthquakes. These aren't going to fall off by any means because they go way back into the wall, but they're cracked. When they crack, then they allow more water in, so the degradation can continue. And then this is one of the areas of the stone. There is, this is probably the worst situation, but this is a piece of stone that fell off several years ago, fell into the lawn. Yeah, there's the opportunity when they do crack and water gets into them, it could expand, and so there could be pieces that come off the building. This is a little confusing, but this is a photograph looking down from the roof. There's a band of terracotta between the 4th and 5th floors of the building. You can see the white is the remnants of the elastomeric coating that was put on several years ago. The brown is the terracotta, and so once this white elastomeric coating deteriorated, the terracotta underneath continued to deteriorate, and now it's gone in many places, and so the deterioration is going to continue. And this just shows the underside of that. There was some decorative terracotta along between the 4th and 5th floors, and some of the water when the water does get into it, it carries on through, and it'll cause some residue as it exits. So a photograph of the marble columns. Now this is enlarged considerably, so but there are some cracks in the marble columns. Now the marble columns are like 3.5 feet in diameter, so they're really big. There is some surface cracking there. One of the things we'll be doing is sealing this with some epoxy just to seal it up so the water doesn't get into it anymore. But it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And this is one of the stone beams over the portico. There's a couple things here. One is, you can see the white, and then there are some cracks in some of this stone. Again, some similar to the windowsills. The stone is a brittle material, and it doesn't resist those lateral forces very well. The white stuff indicates that water has gotten into the assembly, and when it finally drains out, it takes some of the salts from the concrete and the stone and stuff with it, and then it evaporates on the surface and leaves this white residue. So, the white isn't the problem. The white is an indication that there's an issue somewhere else, and so it's a symptom. And this is an ugly picture, but it's not as serious as it looks. This is in the crawl space. I'm probably one of the few people that have ever been in that crawl space. It's not a very pleasant place to be. It's really wet, it's really damp, and it's really hot. And those conditions over the years have caused moisture to get into the concrete joists. What I'm looking at here, this is one of the foundations, one of the footings. And these are joists that actually are concrete joists that support the first floor, or the ground floor, I should say. These aren't a structural problem, but what's happened over the years is the moisture has gotten into the concrete. When moisture gets into the concrete, it goes to the reinforcing bar, the steel reinforcing bar. When the reinforcing bar starts to rust, it expands, and then it pops the concrete off. So this is another issue that we need to address. It's not a structural issue. The reinforcing bar is fine, but it needs to be fixed. And there's several indications of this across the floor, the ground floor, and that'll be the first thing we address, is some of these issues. The purpose of this investigation that started last fall and the restoration design is twofold. One is to address the structural integrity of the building, primarily relative to seismic forces, which are lateral forces, which we understand a lot more now than we did 80 years ago when the building was designed. And then secondly, to look at the envelope of the building, the brick, and the enclosure of the building and the condition of that. It's an opportunity to do both at the same time, because what we're anticipating is reinforcing the building seismically by making the walls stronger. When we're doing that, we can address the condition of the walls at the same time. The building structure is precast, is poured in place concrete from the foundations all the way to the roof. There's columns, beams, concrete floors, a concrete roof. And the brick and the stone is an applied wall. It's not bearing. It's just filling in the voids between the concrete frame. So the concrete frame can be reinforced by putting in some more concrete shear walls, they're called. So you have the columns setting up and the beams going across. What you do is you fill in the area between those columns. So instead of allowing the columns to do this, they're stiff, and they'll reduce those forces. So that's a good opportunity. While we're doing that, we can address the condition of the walls. So there's an opportunity to do both at one time. The third is, since all the old heating system, which is 80 years old, is on the walls, we have the opportunity to bring the heating system up to modern-day standards, which are a bit much more efficient. So when the exterior walls, we'll be reinforcing the building, addressing the exterior condition of the building, and improving the efficiency of the building by updating the heating system. Instead of steam, it'll be hot water. So that'll be a big deal. This building, or this drawing, kind of shows there's columns. Those are all concrete. There's a series of columns along the outside walls, and then and along the corridor, there's a series of concrete columns that are filled in with. For the most part, originally they were hollow clay tile walls, which are non-bearing. They were just walls, and they're covered with plaster. Some of the newer walls are steel studs, and they're a little bit lighter. But probably at least half the walls in the building are still the original 1930s hollow clay tile walls with plaster. So, but the concrete is in good shape. The concrete structure, the foundations, except for those little things that I showed there, are in good shape. The floors are in good shape. There's a few little cracks, but generally speaking, it's in very good shape for an 80-year-old building. In terms of the foundation, one of the things that was kind of interesting is we saw on the original drawings, and we have copies of the original drawings, by the way. DOT had those in a file drawer somewhere. We've now gotten them into the historic library, so they're a little safer. But we had the original drawings, which are beautiful drawings. They're ink on linen, very beautifully done. But there was a big change. The foundation originally showed the footings going down about 6 or 7 feet below the ground floor. There was a big change when they actually got there and they opened up the site and dug down. They found that the top portion of the site was not very well consolidated. It was fairly loose material. So they did some investigation, and down about anywhere from 10 to 15 feet is a very, very dense glacial till layer, which is probably about nearly the same density as rock in terms of bearing capacity for buildings. And they had the foresight to extend those footings down, so they took it down from where it was originally designed. They dropped them down another, in some cases, 8 or 10 feet, and they're bearing on this very, very dense glacial till layer. So the building is setting on very good material. We did some geotechnical investigations just before we got started. We drilled 4 or 5 holes around the building, and we went down. In the first one, we went down through that glacial till layer to bedrock. Bedrock was 60 feet deep. The till layer was about 15 feet deep, and so we drilled 45 feet through this till layer. R&M Engineering did the work, and drilling through that till layer, they said, was actually harder than drilling through rock, because it was so dense, and it was hard on their equipment to do that. So the next 2 holes, they just went down to the till layer. They just found the till layer, and it's very consistent, about that same layer. The last one, which they drilled, was at the I guess I call it the northeast corner of the building, between the Capitol and the parking garage on Seward Street. They drilled down over 100. They drilled down the 15 feet, found the glacial till, They went down 100 feet and still did not find bedrock. But the real key is the foundations are very well founded on this glacial till layer. There's no indication in the building there's been any differential settlement over the years. So, we're starting from a good premise and a good foundation for the building, and that's really good. If that was the case, if that wasn't the case, well, if it wasn't the case, it probably would have failed years ago. But it is the case, and so we're starting from a good premise. So, and that original drawing. Well, that copy was a copy of the original drawing. This is another copy of the original drawing. And you can see what I'm saying. These were from the original drawings. They actually took these foundations down deeper and found it on that good layer. The floors, all the floors, the columns, beams, all the way up to the roof are concrete. They're well reinforced, and structurally the building is fine to resist vertical loads, which is snow loads and people and furniture and all that. The only thing it isn't adequate in is resisting lateral forces that we understand today. And so putting in these concrete shear walls along the outside of the building will address that. The rest of the building is fine. And this shows how we're planning on doing the reinforcing structurally. This is a drawing of the corner. You can see over here, it's kind of the corner, call it the southwest corner of the building. There's a concrete column at the corner, and then you go a little ways, there'll be more concrete columns. What we're planning on doing is taking off the interior finish of the walls and then pouring or spraying concrete along those walls. So we'll reinforce the outside of the walls with concrete, which stiffens the whole frame and makes a shear wall out of the building rather than a post and beam situation. And this gray on this drawing indicates where that concrete would actually go from column to column and making the plane very stiff as opposed to where it could be a little more loose. And this is an example. This isn't on the building, obviously, but this is an example of what that could look like, where we would form up against the existing wall or another form, put a series of reinforcing bars and then concrete and connect those from column to column and floor to floor. And we're leaving the windows, however. And this is an illustration, again done by Paul Lukes, that shows on the left-hand side the existing condition. The floors and the beams, this is all concrete. It's a section through one of the floors at a window. And you can see that this kind of pink area is the brick. The brick is actually 3 bricks wide, 3 widths wide. So, and then on the inside of that is 4 inches of hollow clay tile, which is, and then plaster. The hollow clay tile is what they ran, conduit and plumbing through. But the whole wall is like this thick, and it's very heavy. And that, from a seismic perspective, is not a particularly good idea either, because you've got all this weight up high. But there's 2 options that we're looking at to fix the outside of the building. One is to restore the brick, leave the brick in place, and attach it to this new concrete shear wall. So what we would do, you can't really see this on drawing, but we would drill into the brick and then attach it to the reinforcing bar in the concrete wall so that everything is all held together really well. And then seal the outside of the brick. One of the things also that was lacking from the original building was there was a lot of horizontal ledges. And those horizontal ledges that I mentioned tend to collect water and dust, and they can grow algae and moss, and that tends to erode whatever material they're on. So all the horizontal ledges, the large horizontal ledges, we'd be putting in new metal flashing, which would be copper, which would be appropriate for a building of this age and this type, and so that water would tend to run off quickly and not stand there and soak in. And so that would be a way to do it without really affecting the appearance very much. The second option, which sounds a little more aggressive but actually has some big advantages, is to replace the brick. That sounds like a big deal, but you remember from those original photographs, the brick the outside surface of the brick is pretty well deteriorated. So all we could do is to spray a sealant on that, which would probably have to be replaced every few years because it's not going to last very long. It's a thickness or its consistency of water. So you'd spray it on, eventually it would wear off, and you'd have to replace it again. And there's also some inherent problems with the brick in that water can get into the joints of the brick, and it doesn't have a way to get back out again because there wasn't a lot of flashing put in. So replacing the brick is a pretty attractive option for a couple of reasons. One is it lightens the building because we don't need 3 layers of brick if we were doing it over again. We only need 1 layer to replicate the current appearance of the building. So it lightens the building, so it helps seismically because the building is less weight. It also gives the opportunity for some insulation on the inside of the concrete, or thicker insulation, without making the rooms any smaller. So, because we're taking off, like 8 inches of brick, and we can replace that 8 inches with insulation. So, not only are we replacing the heating system, but we can also add insulation to the assembly and improve the thermal values as well as improving the efficiency of the heating system. So replacing the brick is an attractive option, I think. So, and then this is a section of the base of the building. You saw that one drawing that showed the deteriorated stone at the base of the building. I think that's deteriorated to the point where it can't be saved, and we'll be replacing all of that with precast concrete, a very high-density precast concrete, which will have the same appearance. The finish of the concrete will have the same appearance as the stone. So historically, we'll be replicating the original appearance of the building. And then another important issue is we'd be restoring the cornice of the building with appropriate material. You can see we look at metal flashings over the top. We think one of the problems originally was that this top of the cornice, which is about this wide, it's probably 3 feet wide, but it had this the top that we think was either concrete, probably was terracotta, and it just was a big, broad, horizontal ledge that collected a lot of water, and that's probably why it started to leak. The joints weren't perfect, but we can put this cornice back on, which does 2 things. It restores the historical appearance of the building back to the 1930s, but it also protects the walls because it's kind of the physics of how buildings react to wind and rain, but a little bit of an overhang on the cornice affects the wind patterns around the building and actually protects the walls down below it. So it's I didn't understand that as well until we were talking to Paul Lukes, who had some photographs of that and showed how just a little bit of a roof overhang can actually help protect the rest of the wall because the wind, instead of the wind hitting the building, it tends to go up and over, and it tends to be intercepted and doesn't hit the walls as much, so it carries the rain with it. So it is a big help to restore the cornice. And then this is made a little more technical detail, but this is the portico. The portico is obviously the most recognizable component of the building. It's the front door. It's where it has the Alaska State Capitol written across the front. It has these large, locally mined marble columns. But it also is an area that shows some of the most deterioration. The stone, as I showed some of those photographs, the stone has allowed water to get through, and it's had some deterioration. So a lot of the upper portion of the portico will have to be replaced. We're going to save the columns, and I've been talking to my miner friends about drilling a hole down through these columns about 3 or 4 inches in diameter, putting in a large reinforcing bar down through it, and then filling the area with grout so that these columns would be securely held together, and then we'll seal the cracks that I mentioned with epoxy sealant to prolong those and polish them. They've actually weathered a little bit, so they're now not as smooth and shiny as they were 80 years ago, but we can polish them and bring them back to life. So save those. Save as much of the stone railing and portico as we can, particularly the balusters. The balusters are about this big around, about so high, and we'll be saving those. And the rest of it will be replaced with precast concrete, which the areas that can't be saved, and it'll look the same, bring back the same thing. So this is the building today, or about a week ago. You can see that the cornice is still gone. It hadn't been replaced yet. Last summer, we put a little temporary protection over the front door. As much as anything, it was just precautionary and just to give people a feeling that there isn't any problem with the building, which there isn't. There's no indication that anything's going to fall out. There's nothing imminent with the building, but it indicates that it's time to do something with the building. It's a very historic building. It's a valuable resource in the state's inventory. It's time to be fixed. It hasn't had any significant work done on it in 80 years. Probably isn't any other building in the state that's gone 80. Well, probably aren't many other buildings in the state that are 80 years old, first off. But most buildings get some sort of work every 20, 30, 40 years, and this one's gone 80 years without anything significantly being done. So it's time to do that. The plan is to do some work this summer. The first thing we'd be doing would be addressing the structural issues with the portico. Our plan right now is to not put the railing back on, but to do the structural work and reinforce the columns, replace the stone beams with concrete beams, and restore the structural integrity of it, and then leave that until the rest of the building is done, which would be done. The south wall of the building then would be done in the summer of 2014, and we'd leave the portico in that condition just because it would potentially be damaged during the construction of the next phase, and it can coordinate better so that the material will join better together instead of trying to put something in the summer of 2013 and then join something to it in 2014, possibly with two different contractors. So that seemed to make sense. The other thing we'll be doing this summer is looking at cleaning up the crawl space, repairing those joists that we talked about, getting a lot of the soil out of there. For some reason, they backfilled a lot of soil, and so there's places in the crawl space that there's only about this much room between the top of the soil and the bottom of the joist. And so we're going to take out a whole bunch of the soil out of the crawl space of the building. Any pipe that was ever put in there 80 years ago is still there, most of which are abandoned. There's abandoned conduits, there's wires, there's old plumbing pipes that are no longer active that are still there. So we're going to clean all that up. Eventually we need to get back into the crawl space and do some structural modifications, because the shear walls I talked about will actually go from the about 4 feet down all the way up to the roof. And so what you do with seismic is you're trying to take the forces that generate at the roof of the building and take them all the way down to the ground so they can dissipate into the soil without being resolved with the building. So that's the plan, is to do the crawl space and the portico structure this summer. The south wall, the whole south wall, the summer of 2014. By the summer I'm talking like May to December, the construction season of 2014. And then the rest of the building in two series, May to December 2015 and 2016. And that would allow session to go on. So from December to May, the building could be reoccupied again. The people that are right against the wall that's being remodeled will have to be relocated, so that's an issue we need for coordination. But during the summer session, the building has the least dense occupancy, and so we can move people around, we hope, and do that work. And so it's going to take 4 years. So this is a picture of the building in about 1930 with the scaffold all around the building. Actually, Tim McLeod thinks it's a picture of the electrical distribution system in town. Bill, maybe you concur with that. It just happens to be at the Capitol site, but I think maybe he's wrong in that. This is scaffolding all around the building. When they were building the building originally in about 1930, if everything goes well, this could look about the same in 1914 or 2014 and 2015 as we scaffold the building again to do the restoration. And one last picture. Remember, I said that the Secretary of the Treasurer was, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, you can see it pretty good. The Secretary of the Treasurer is the one that had all the excuses for delaying the project. Look who gets the top billing on the cornerstone, the Secretary of Treasury. Second is the architect, James Whitmore. That's okay. And then third, with the lowest font and the bottom of the thing, is the governor of the state of Territory of Alaska, George Parks. So you kind of see the pecking order and the hierarchy as the way they went through the system. So that's the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, please fire away. Yeah.